A single political move can ripple across continents faster than most people expect. One announcement in Washington, one reaction in Ottawa, and suddenly London is part of the conversation too. When trade, diplomacy, and financial strategy collide, alliances can shift in ways that surprise even experienced observers. Today you're going to understand how a move involving Canada, the United States, and the United Kingdom created political tension, and why figures like Donald Trump and Mark Carney ended up at the center of the discussion. Before we get deeper into the story, let's turn this moment into something bigger than just another news breakdown. If you're listening right now, drop the word "watching" in the comments so we can see how many people are following these global shifts together. Conversations like this only matter if people are paying attention to how decisions in powerful capitals shape the world economy. Assalamu alaikum, and let's walk through what really happens when political strategy meets economic reality. To understand why this story gained so much attention, you first have to understand the relationship between the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom. These three countries have long been connected through history, trade, military alliances, and financial cooperation. They share intelligence partnerships, participate in NATO, and maintain strong economic ties. But despite these close relationships, economic interests sometimes pull countries in different directions. During Donald Trump's presidency, trade policy became a central part of the American political agenda. The administration argued that previous trade agreements placed the United States at a disadvantage, particularly in manufacturing. As a result, Washington pursued renegotiations, tariffs, and tougher bargaining positions with several trading partners. One of the most visible examples was the renegotiation of the North American Free Trade Agreement. The agreement, originally signed in 1994, linked the economies of the United States, Canada, and Mexico. In 2020, it was replaced with the United States, Mexico, Canada Agreement, often called USMCA. The updated deal introduced new rules for automobile manufacturing, labor standards, and digital trade. For instance, the agreement increased the percentage of a car that must be produced in North America for it to qualify for tariff-free trade. That change aimed to encourage more manufacturing jobs to remain within the region. At first glance, the renegotiation looked like a standard diplomatic process. Governments often revise trade agreements to reflect new economic realities, but the negotiations were intense, and tensions appeared at several points along the way. Canada faced pressure to protect its agricultural supply management system, especially in the dairy sector. American negotiators wanted greater access to Canadian dairy markets. Eventually, Canada agreed to open a small percentage of its dairy market to American farmers, but the issue remained politically sensitive. Now here's where the story becomes more interesting. While these negotiations were unfolding, global financial leadership was also shifting. One figure who attracted attention was Mark Carney. Carney had already served as governor of the Bank of Canada and later became the governor of the Bank of England, making him one of the few individuals to lead the central bank of two major economies. Central banks play a critical role in shaping economic stability. They set interest rates, manage inflation targets, and respond to financial crises. Carney became known internationally for his communication style and his emphasis on financial stability, climate risk, and long-term economic resilience. During his tenure at the Bank of England, Carney oversaw monetary policy through a particularly complicated period that included the Brexit referendum and the economic uncertainty surrounding the United Kingdom's exit from the European Union. Brexit alone reshaped the global economic conversation. In 2016, British voters chose to leave the European Union, triggering years of negotiations about trade rules, financial services access, and regulatory standards. Businesses across Europe and North America watched closely because the outcome could influence investment decisions for decades. Now imagine this complicated landscape. On one side, the United States is renegotiating trade relationships and introducing tariffs in certain sectors. On another side, the United Kingdom is redefining its position in the global economy after Brexit. Meanwhile, Canada is balancing its economic ties with both nations while also expanding trade relationships with Europe and Asia. You can start to see how quickly the chessboard becomes crowded. Let's pause for a moment and bring this down to something more relatable. Imagine three business partners running a massive company together. For years, they follow one strategy that works reasonably well. But suddenly one partner wants to rewrite the rules, another partner is restructuring their own operations, and the third partner begins exploring new markets to reduce dependence on the first two. Even if none of them want a conflict, their priorities start pulling in different directions. This is essentially what happens in international economics. Countries constantly adjust their policies to protect domestic industries, attract investment, and maintain political stability. Now let's look at the financial angle. When political tensions appear between major economies, financial markets begin analyzing potential consequences immediately. Investors consider how tariffs, regulatory changes, or trade barriers might influence corporate profits. If a company relies heavily on exporting goods between the United States and Canada, for example, any disruption could affect its revenue projections. Investors then adjust their portfolios accordingly. That doesn't always mean markets collapse. Often it simply means volatility increases while analysts gather more information. But there's another dimension to this story that rarely receives enough attention. Global influence isn't determined only by trade agreements or tariffs. Financial leadership, central banking credibility, and international coordination also play a huge role. This is where Mark Carney's reputation becomes significant. As a respected central banker who led both the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, Carney became a bridge between financial institutions in North America and Europe. His speeches frequently emphasized the importance of international cooperation in maintaining financial stability. During the aftermath of the global financial crisis, central banks around the world coordinated policies to stabilize markets and restore confidence. Those relationships matter because financial crises rarely stop at national borders. A banking problem in one major economy can quickly affect credit markets elsewhere. So when observers say political moves can backfire, they often mean the broader network of economic relationships responds in unexpected ways. Consider tariffs as an example. When one country imposes tariffs to protect domestic industries, the targeted country may respond with its own tariffs. This can escalate into a trade dispute that affects multiple sectors. But there's also a second effect. Other countries may start strengthening partnerships with each other to reduce reliance on the country initiating the tariffs. In other words, economic pressure can sometimes encourage new alliances rather than compliance. Canada has already pursued diversification strategies by signing agreements like the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement with the European Union and joining the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. These agreements expand Canada's access to markets in Europe and Asia while maintaining strong ties with North America. Now imagine the strategic implications. If Canada deepens trade relationships with Europe and Asia while the United Kingdom builds new partnerships after Brexit, the global trade map gradually shifts. The United States remains one of the largest economies in the world, but its partners may gain more flexibility in choosing where to trade and invest. That flexibility changes the balance of negotiation power. Let's use a simple analogy. If a shopkeeper has only one supplier, the supplier can dictate prices. But if the shopkeeper has 5 suppliers competing for business, the shopkeeper gains leverage. Countries apply similar logic when negotiating trade agreements. But remember something important. None of this necessarily means alliances are breaking apart. In fact, the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom continue cooperating closely through military partnerships like NATO and intelligence sharing arrangements. Economic disagreements occur even among close allies. The real story is about how those disagreements influence long-term strategy. Now let's return to the question we opened earlier. Why did analysts say political moves could backfire? Because international economics operates like a system of interconnected gears. Turn one gear too aggressively, and others begin spinning in ways you didn't expect. Tariffs can encourage domestic production, but also provoke retaliation. Renegotiating agreements can strengthen certain industries, but push partners to explore alternatives. Financial leaders like Mark Carney often emphasize stability because sudden disruptions can create ripple effects throughout global markets. And those ripple effects influence everything from currency values to investment flows. As we move toward the bigger picture, remember that economic power today depends not only on size but also on relationships. Countries that maintain diverse partnerships often navigate uncertainty more easily than those relying on a single major alliance. This brings us to the moment where all the threads connect. Trade negotiations, financial leadership, Brexit, and North American economic integration all intersect within the same global system. When one element shifts, the others respond. That's why headlines describing dramatic political clashes rarely tell the full story. Behind every headline lies a complex network of agreements, institutions, and strategic calculations shaping the global economy. Now let's bring everything together before we close. First, the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom remain deeply connected through trade, finance, and security cooperation. Second, policy changes such as tariffs or renegotiated agreements can create tension even among close allies, especially when domestic economic priorities differ. Third, global financial leaders and institutions often play quiet but important roles in stabilizing markets and maintaining international coordination. Understanding these dynamics helps you see beyond dramatic headlines and recognize the deeper forces shaping global politics. If this breakdown helped you understand how international economic decisions ripple across countries and alliances, consider liking the video and subscribing for more clear explanations of major global stories. And now I want to hear your perspective. Do you think strong countries should prioritize protecting domestic industries, even if it strains relationships with allies? Or do you believe long-term cooperation matters more than short-term economic advantage? Share your thoughts in the comments, because the most interesting conversations happen when people from different countries bring their views to the table.